get started on our lecture? Okay.
Two boys.
So I don't expect y'all to be turning anything to me this week. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Unless you have some old stuff or something like that you want to turn in. So that's good. And then week 16, since I'm finishing week 16 today, I took 2 weeks to do it. It's really not due to you get back. If it's a little late or whatever, I'm okay with that. All right. So have a nice Christmas break. All right. Okay. So let's finish up the Renaissance. We're in the second part of 16. So in which city did the Renaissance begin? Who remembers? What country? No, seriously? Nobody knows what country we're in?
We're in Britain.
No.
America.
France.
Where did the Renaissance begin?
Italy.
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 Italy. What city in Italy?
North Pole.
Paris.
That's not in Italy.
Florence?
Florence, thank you. It's Florence. In Italian, it's spelled Firenze. Remember with the red roofs, right? All right, so a couple reasons why Florence rose to the top there was because, first of all, they were very wealthy at this time. A couple things that happened. First of all, that all those crusaders coming back, there was trade that they brought with them. They set up trade routes and things like that. And then when Constantinople fell, those people that left Constantinople went to Florence because they were invited there by Lorenzo the Magnificent. He said, come here and be part of my school, my Neoplatonic school, so we can have all those great works of literature and stuff that you have. They took them from Constantinople and brought them back with them to Italy. All right, so here we can see, so Florence is right there. Their main competitors in trade and in knowledge, and that would have been the nearby cities of Pisa, Venice, Genoa, Rome. Yeah. We're going to see, in fact, how it shifts. The Renaissance will shift between Florence and Venice and Rome as it moves on. Okay, also, so Florence the Enlightened, so all the knowledge that was going on here. Remember the Medici family, Cosimo de' Medici, and then his children, Lorenzo the Magnificent. Remember the story about Lorenzo and his brother in the church? On Easter Sunday, there was an attack, and his brother was killed. Now, his brother, when that happened, had a wife with a child. She was pregnant with a child. And so that child, when he was born, Lorenzo raised that child as his own. So he had his own children, plus he had this nephew. So there's Lorenzo il Magnifico right there as he grew up. And here's his firstborn son. So this guy's name is Piero the Unfortunate. Poor guy right there. Then we have, let me make sure I get it right, because there's a couple. So this second one is Giovanni, Giovanni, who is going to become a pope. And then we have the nephew, the adopted son. His name is Julio, or Julio. Remember, his brother was Julio, so he named the boy after his brother. So he's Julio Jr., if you will. There he is. He will also become a pope. All right, so we're going to have the Medici family is going to be very influential for quite some time, really starting with Cosimo, but Lorenzo brought Florence into its greatness. During that time, here he is with a bunch of people in his school. He had a great love of art. This young man showed up, and his name is Michelangelo. Okay, we're going to talk more about Michelangelo toward the end of our lecture today, because he lived a really, 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 really long life. I mean, he died in his 90s. And so because of that, he kind of covers all the history. He will have been working throughout all the history we're talking about today. But he was really discovered by Lorenzo in Florence. And we'll talk about some of his things that made him famous. He made a sculpture and he buried it and pretended like it was an ancient Roman sculpture. And everybody fell for it at first, and then they figured it out. Then he admitted it. And then Lorenzo said, I want that kid because he's so good. Yeah, so it's a great story. But another artist, so at the beginning, Michelangelo included, and this guy, Botticelli, are from Florence. They're all from that region. So they weren't even like transplants that came there to find this place. They were born there. And so Botticelli, remember last time I told you about Masaccio? And it meant barrel? I was wrong. This is the guy whose name means barrel. Okay, so his name Botticelli means round barrel. And it has to do with his brother being big and round. I don't know why he took on the name, because he wasn't big and round. But so he took on the name Botticelli. The other guy, Masaccio, that meant sloppy. His name was Sloppy Tom. It's Masaccio. All right, but that was last week. Oh, so Botticelli, you're going to notice, you're going to recognize some of his work. Now, some of the art at the time would have been more traditional. sacred works. So right here we have the Annunciation. This is the angel Gabriel coming to tell Mary that she's going to have a baby. But what now is coming into its own in Florence because of the influence of Lorenzo is bringing back the classical subject matter, right? The classical. And Botticelli painted this one. Does this look familiar to anyone? This is called Primavera, and Primavera in Italian means springtime, and it's showing the spring coming in. So we have sort of this, I think that is a Greek god, one of the Greek gods, Ares or one of these guys over here, and they're dressing up spring right here. Here's the winter wind going away because the spring is coming. One of the things people say about Botticelli is that the women always look like they're standing on their tiptoes. So do you see little tiptoes going on right there? Okay. Here is another work. So one of his contemporaries at the time was a man named Leonardo da Vinci. You've probably heard of him, right? Vinci, by the way, was a little town right outside of Florence. So he was Florentine as well. He made fun of Botticelli because he thought he didn't have very good perspective on his people. He thought the people, for instance, their arms were too long, their legs were too long, things like this. And so bringing in the subject matter really, really closely on this one, we're looking at Venus and Mars. It was supposed to help him with his perspective, but you see a little bit, some of this perspective looks a little bit out, like the neck here of Mars, right? It looks like maybe he's sort of out of whack a little bit here. This painting, by the way, was made to celebrate a wedding, the wedding of the Vasari family. And they say somewhere right over here there are wasps, and for some reason the wasp was the symbol of the Vasari family. I don't know if I'd pick a wasp as my symbol. But you see everything's really close up. We don't have anything really in the background or in the middle ground here at all. This is probably his most famous painting. You've probably seen this one. It's called The Birth of Venus. Interesting, I have here that it's tempera on canvas, which would have been very, very new. They weren't using canvas, really. It was really the Northerners that used canvas. But 1486, that's very early for that. So we see Venus coming in. The story is, of course, she was born out of the sea and came in on a shell. Take a look close up. Look at her neck. Do you think it's a little bit out of proportion? Sort of stretched a little bit? So this is what Leonardo would have been criticizing. Now, other people would have said it was artistic license. He did that on purpose. Also, something you can tell, notice how he uses outlines around the face. So it's like he used a pencil. Who has painted here before? Don't you draw the thing first? Then you paint it?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what Botticelli was doing. He was drawing. He was a good draftsman, so he was very good at drawing. And he actually really liked his drawings. But you can see the lines in there, okay? Another thing that Leonardo would have criticized, and we'll see why because of that. All right, here is one of his sacred works, the Adoration of the Magi, but he did something kind of interesting here. He included in the picture of the people coming to adore the baby Jesus, not people of the time, but people of his time. All right, so right here you can actually see Cosimo de' Medici right there. And here are Lorenzo and his brother Julio, the one who was killed. And this right here is the artist himself. That is Botticelli, okay? This may be the first time we've seen this, but it's not going to be the last time we see it, where the artist puts himself in the painting, and look where he's looking. He's looking at you. He's looking out at you. He's not looking at the action that's going on. And we're going to see this over and over again. Probably most of it would be like an homage to Botticelli, to say, oh, I'm like Botticelli. I'm going to have my painting in here looking out at you. All right, now we got Leonardo. Okay, everybody likes Leonardo da Vinci. Another guy who lived a long time. He lived to be an old man. And so we have a lot of his history going through here. He's from Vinci, which is close to Florence, so he's definitely an Italian. He will have to move around at the whim of whoever's going to pay him, because these artists had to have patrons who would pay them to do the work. He started off in Florence, of course, with Lorenzo. Lorenzo's not going to live forever, so the Medici are going to fall out of favor. We'll see that here in a minute. He'll move on to Milan, and he'll actually end up in the court of Francis, King Francis in France, which is where he'll die as an old man. Let's watch a little biography about Leonardo.
Leonardo was among the most important painters of the Italian Renaissance and the father of the High Renaissance style.
Leonardo da Vinci was born on April 15, 1452, in Vinci, Italy. By age 14, he was apprenticing under the famous artist Verrocchio.
One of Leonardo's greatest contributions to painting was his introduction of the idea of sfumato, which essentially means smoky, and is a way of producing atmospheric perspective in paintings.
Da Vinci became a master artist in the Guild of St. Luke at age 20, and in 1482 moved to Milan and began taking commissions from wealthy patrons.
One of the earliest complete works he did was the Annunciation, which has that spectacular background that he had perfected.
The most famous work and the most important one that Leonardo produced while in Milan was his Last Supper for the refectory of the Church of Santa Maria della Grazia.
He left Milan in 1499 and traveled throughout Italy, working for a number of different patrons.
Leonardo's 1503 commission for the Battle of Anghiari represented a high point in his life. It was a vast project, a fresco painting that would have decorated one wall of the Grand Council chamber in the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence. And Michelangelo was to paint the other wall facing. The project never came to be.
During the early 1500s, Da Vinci also began painting the Mona Lisa.
The Mona Lisa is one of Leonardo's most important works. It's today one of the world's most famous paintings.
I can't think of any other work that has so consistently fascinated people.
Leonardo da Vinci was a true Renaissance man. He's well known as a great artist, but in fact, he also made great contributions to foundations of science.
He engaged in projects like designs to reroute rivers, urban planning, the creation of pedestrian streets in the centers of cities, all designed to cut down on the chaos of life around him.
Leonardo went to Rome to work for Pope Leo X in 1513, and he stayed about 3 years.
While there, he practiced dissections and laid the foundations for the study of human anatomy.
He spent his final years in the employ of the King of France, producing works for him as well as for other members of the French nobility.
Leonardo da Vinci died on May 2nd, 1519 in Ambrose, France. Such was his stature that it was said he died in the arms of the French king.
Leonardo is deservedly one of history's most famous painters. As the founder of the High Renaissance style, as one of the greatest naturalists who ever lived, he is someone who we continue to admire today.
Okay, so we're going to look at some of his art here, his sketches right here. Most painters would begin with a sketch as a practice and then maybe paint. One thing that Leonardo did differently is he started with a sketch, but when he started to paint, he didn't draw on the piece of board or whatever he was using. He actually painted it straight onto it without any outlines. And so we're going to look at Mona Lisa in a second, we won't see those very distinct outlines like Botticelli had right here. But these are beautiful sketches. Horses were one of his big subject matters. Also hands. Hands are hard to sketch. You probably know that, right? They're difficult to do. And so there he is practicing. He has all sorts of notebooks where he had all these doodles in there that he was doing for practicing. He had a deep interest in anatomy. This right here is called the Vitruvian Man, and it's talking about perspective. And so, for instance, I think if you measure from your top of your head to your feet, it should equal the outstretch of your arms. That should be equal, and that's what he's showing right here. The video mentioned that he did some dissections. It was illegal to dissect human beings, so he did it illegally, and there were possibly some paying some people to go rob graves, because that's where you find dead people, this kind of thing. But he was so interested in what was going on beneath the surface. He wanted to see those muscles, and he dissected horses and things too, so we could do those horse drawings. Yeah, he wanted to see how all that worked together. Here's showing you some of that perspective, the golden rectangle right there. Some of his inventions, this flying machine right here, for a long time it took us a while to figure out how to achieve flight. We thought that the birds flapping of their wings was the main physical way they could get flight. Turns out that's not how it is. It has to do with the shape of their wing. And that's how we've invented airplanes today, by making that shape of the wing kind of bowed in the middle like that. So apparently this guy, he had somebody get in this deal and pump those little things to flap those wings, and had him jump off the top of a tall building in Florence. And it wasn't him, it was one of his apprentices. And he said, go for it. And he's coming down, he's like, flap the wings, flap. Well, he broke both his legs, the poor kid. And so Leonardo's like, okay, I'm going to give that one up. All right. So, but this one is like this one was never built, but the idea of the first helicopter, which some people still thought it would be a useful design right here. Here is like a tank. I don't know if that was ever built either. All right, so looking at his painting and some of the things that he kind of perfected, this idea of sfumato, it is a smoky kind of a look to it. So that kind of smokiness in the background gives the illusion of distance, and it's far away. Kind of things are a little blurry in the distance, just as if we were looking at it with your eyes. Also, the contrast of dark and light together, it's called chiaroscuro, light and dark together. He was fascinated with that. He liked to juxtapose those and seeing our light and our dark. I believe this painting is called the Madonna of the Rocks, and it's pretty famous. We have John the Baptist and the baby Jesus right here as young babies growing up. The Annunciation, they mentioned that in the video. That's one of my favorite paintings of all time. You can see all sorts of perspective. If you follow those lines, they all end up, I think they're going to show, this is Gabriel announcing to Mary that she'll have a son. There's our horizon right there, all of our lines ending up there. And then that is you. So basically what's happening in this picture is that you are part of it. The vanishing point is on you if it's coming the other way, you see. So we wanted you to be a part of this. The greatest news of all time was the announcement that Jesus would be coming, right? So he's bringing us into that. The Last Supper, very well known for its perspective as well. Follow all the lines. Guess where everything's going to end? Right at Jesus' head, right? So this is somebody's reproduction of this, not the one Leonardo did. This was in the city of Milan. It's in northern Italy. Who is who here? So we have Jesus in the middle. Right here, this person that looks kind of feminine, it's a man without a beard. And so they say that's John, because John was supposed to be the youngest of the apostles. And it was called the one whom Jesus loved, right? And the one who took care of his mother and stuff. So he didn't have a beard. There was a whole book written about the fact that that was actually Mary. It's a book by Dan Brown. What's that one called? The Da Vinci Code? Yeah, the Da Vinci Code. That's not Mary, that's John. Okay. And then we have right here, you're going to see, this is the moment when Jesus says, one of you at this table will betray me tonight. And they're all looking at each other. Is it me? Is it me? Is it me? Where is Judas? There he is. Judas is the only one, apparently, who is like, he knows the truth, right? Everybody else is wondering what's going on. Is it me? They're leaning this way. But Judas is sort of not really surprised. Everybody else is surprised. Okay, so this is found on the wall of a church. It's up high. I've been to Milan. I've seen the painting. We had to hunt for it. It's kind of strange. There weren't signs everywhere saying this way to the Last Supper. But so it's up on the wall as fresco. Leonardo did try a new technique of fresco, which was unfortunate. And the reason is that the fresco hasn't lasted. It started flaking off in Leonardo's lifetime. So it started showing that it was not going to be a good technique, even back then. And since that time, we've had several different artists come in and try to restore it. And so it apparently looks pretty good today. But this city was, Milan, was bombed heavily during World War II. And you can see here, here's the church. This is the wall that has the painting on it. They put a big barrier up there against it. But notice the rest of the church was knocked down by bombs, and the one wall with the Last Supper on it did stay standing. It wasn't bombed. And so there it is today. You can see that was a doorway. That used to be a doorway going into another area of the church. And that's why it's up high, because it was above the door. The Mona Lisa being probably his most famous. It's called La Gioconda. It was painted. He had this with him his whole life. It's interesting if you've ever seen movies where they show somebody trying to steal it and it's rolled up. Okay, it's not on canvas. It's on a board. So it'd be a flat. It's only about this big. Okay, you can measure. It's not big at all. But it has massive frame. It's in the Louvre Museum in France, in Paris today. So it's all on panel. You can see her sit. Look at the sfumato in the background. You can see very smoky looking back there. Also aerial perspective. She's sitting somewhere where they're looking, and she's up on high somewhere. And you can see down below there is the valley or whatever it is. Let's take a closer look at her face. Now, would you consider that smiling? They all talk about Mona Lisa's smile, but is she really smiling? I guess a little bit, right? She's not frowning. Yeah. Notice also, take a look at her chin. Remember Botticelli's chin of Venus, how it was very much a line coming down? You can see that. Do you see that here? No, it's all blended in. Okay, he's using that chiaroscuro technique, that dark versus light right there. This has many, many layers of glaze over it. Not sure exactly how that works as an artist, but these glaze, and it kind of gives it almost a shimmer or a glow from within, if you will. We don't know who she is, by the way. Look at her hands. Also, no lines. See, it's all just very that. If you've ever drawn with pencil and you rub the lines and kind of blur them, it's kind of like that, you know, but it's done in paint right there. The proportions, once again, we have the golden rectangle right there showing all the perspective he used. He was very much scientific about the perspective he used. So there it is in the Louvre. It used to be, the first time I went to the Louvre, it was on a wall with several other paintings. It was very strange. We're like, oh, this is nice. This is the Mona Lisa. There it was. Well, now they put it on its own wall, and you have to stand back behind this deal right here. And this must be closed. The museum must be closed at this point, because whenever you're going into the Mona Lisa room, it's just packed with people, and you've got to kind of wait till you get up to the front, do your little selfie thing, you know, this kind of deal. And there's tons of paintings on the other walls, so it's hard to tell here. In 1961, I think it was up with other paintings, kind of like that. It was stolen. Somebody stole it right out of the Louvre, and it was gone, for a while. And they did recover it finally. But it's only 21 by 30, so 21, right, so it's not very big. Yeah, but beautiful. All right, back in Florence. So Lorenzo had this incredible city now, you know, erupting in the middle of Italy there. And it got to be really licentious, a lot of licentious behavior. People from all these different places coming and mostly having parties. So Lorenzo's sons liked to invite people to have parties in the Medici Palace. And it started to get really, really kind of out of hand. And so the morality police, if you will, came around. And mostly in this man right here. His name is Girolamo Savonarola. And he's going to be very influential in Florence for the next several years right here. He believed that this freedom offered by the Medici had devolved into a sinful licentiousness that was very bad for the people. And he started preaching to all the people. He'd stand in the streets and preach to the people, calling for repentance. So he blamed Lorenzo for the trouble. And Lorenzo at first was a little bit upset about things, but then he started to realize, oh, maybe he's right. And so he tried to sort of clean up his act a little bit. He did invite Savonarola to preach professionally in Florence, and he did for a little while. He didn't have much traction. He left, Savonarola left, and he came back, and when he did that, he got a huge following. It was sort of like an awakening in the city. And then comes the year 1492, which of course is very significant for other things. Mainly Columbus, right, Christopher Columbus, which we'll get to when we get back in January. But it's also the year that Lorenzo died. Okay, so Lorenzo died that year, leaving the city in the charge of his sons. Remember, his son was Piero the Unfortunate. And we're going to see why he's unfortunate. It's coming now. But they do say, this is his death mask, by the way. That was a plaster mask made of him right after he died. And so we have a pretty good idea that he did look like this. This statue here, by the way, is actually in America, up in Washington, D.C., in the Smithsonian Institute. So I've seen it's just a regular human-sized bust. All right, remember last week when I told you about the Italian wars and everybody was fighting to get a piece of Italy, and France was one of those? This is the time that happened. When Lorenzo died, they saw an opening for it to be not unified in Italy, and so that's when Charles invaded. And when he got into Florence, he actually ended up banishing the Medici. And the Medici ran away from Florence. They had to leave their town, and they went to Rome. So here is Charles coming down into France. He kind of went through quickly. When he came through, he actually, he didn't do anything to destroy the city at all. He wouldn't have. But he had a talk with Savonarola. And supposedly Savonarola had given a prophecy that a new Cyrus the Great was coming, and he was going to liberate the country. And then Charles shows up with his big arm, and he said, see, I was right. And the people said, oh, he is a prophet of God. They started to believe him. He also spoke with the king and said, please leave Florence in peace. We will get better. You just go on past us. And he did that. So people thought that Savonarola was not only a prophet, but a brilliant politician. So the Medici flee to Rome. There's Piero and the other two, Giulio and the other one. He has a new name when he becomes pope. So here's Piero the Unfortunate, right there he is. Okay, so he actually fled to Rome, then to Venice. And in Venice, he actually joined the army to fight against the French incursion into Italy. And also the Spanish were part of that battle. I showed you that last week. Later, he did lead Florence for a very short amount of time before that, but during these battles, he actually drowned in the river while on a military campaign. So unfortunate Piero. There's Charles coming into Florence. I don't know if Savonarola's in that picture anywhere. I don't see him, but he ended up passing through Florence, essentially. Yeah, there's Savonarola talking to him. Now Savonarola pretty much has charge of the city, so there's a priest in charge of the city, and he's telling the people to repent. He takes over. The people are getting, they are repenting. They're starting to say, oh, our sins are coming home to roost, because here all of a sudden we've been overtaken by the French and all this kind of thing. And he said, here's the problem, y'all. You have been, instead of studying the Bible, you've been studying those godless Roman and Greek works. You need to bring them all to the city square and burn them. And he had something called the bonfire of the vanities. We're going to burn all the stuff that has taken you away from God. And Sandro Botticelli was one of the people who brought some of his paintings and threw his paintings into the fire. We have no idea what paintings they were. Artists around the world were like, oh, we've lost some great Botticellis. Botticelli had apparently a true conversion at this point. He stopped painting altogether. He said, painting is not a profession that glorifies God. I think that's kind of strange, because some of his sacred works certainly would glorify God. But he quit, so much so that he couldn't make a living doing anything, and he pretty much died penniless. Some of his friends had to buy food for him. I mean, he just had no job to do. So, poor Botticelli. All right, so the new republic grows up in Florence. They're not going to have one leader, but they're going to run under this idea of a republic. This young guy shows up. His name is Niccolo Machiavelli. We'll talk about him here pretty soon. He's going to talk about how to run a city. And he was, at the beginning, he thought, this is so awesome. We've got this guy who loves the people, loves God. We can have this godly city, this pursuit that makes politics more sacred, not so base and human. Well, the Pope wasn't happy about it. Here's the Pope. His name is Alexander VI. We're going to hear about a lot about him. His name is Rodrigo Borgia. All right, he became the Pope during this time, and he told Savonarola to quit preaching the way he was preaching, because he was causing people to move away from the authority of the Pope. He said, you're questioning my authority. And Savonarola said, you better believe I am. I don't think that you're necessarily carrying on the work of God, Mr. Pope. And we'll see that Savonarola was probably right about that. We're going to check into Rodrigo Borgia's life here in just a minute. But he did excommunicate Savonarola, and Savonarola said, you can excommunicate me all day long, but God won't. I'm going to keep preaching. So he kept preaching in Florence. Finally, they actually put him on trial. They accused him of heresy, and he was executed in the same place where they had the bonfire of the vanities. He was hoisted up on a pole, up on this pole, and hanged. So that's how he died. But then they burned everybody. There were two people who were his followers that didn't recant their belief in him. So they all died. So many people would believe that he was a martyr for his cause. A lot of people actually say he's kind of the first hint of the Reformation. Okay, so that people like Martin Luther would have admired this guy. And I think, if nothing else, that he had definitely had some zeal and belief in what he believed in. He was for real about this. He did say that he got special revelations from God, and some of those didn't come true. Therefore, you can't be a prophet unless it's 100% true, right? So I question him a little bit right there. But he's gone now. The Medici get to come back to Florence. Now they come, and this would have been Giulio and the other one who's going to become Pope. Moving up north now, Milan is right up here. Remember, that's where Da Vinci painted the Last Supper. And we have a guy here called Ludovico Sforza. So the Sforza family are in charge, sort of like the Medici were in charge in Florence. And he's known as the Moor Moor is the Spanish word for Muslim, or the Spanish identification of Muslims. And he's called that because his skin was darker. He had sort of darker skin. So that was a nickname he took on. And he's the Duke. So not a prince, not a king, but a Duke, the Dukes of Milan. He sponsored Da Vinci. Da Vinci came in and helped him. I don't know if he built this, but he was going to build this. There was like the largest statue at the time made of bronze, and it's the horse. It's a beautiful horse. This, by the way, is a recreation because the original that was made had to be melted down for ammunition because when the French came in and invaded, they had to fight against them, so they needed it for ammunition. Now we have the Republic of Venice, the queen of the Adriatic. Y'all know Venice?
Mm-hmm.
What's the, unusual about Venice?
It's roads.
The streets?
The streets
Are
are water.
water, right. You get around by going on boats, through the water. The canals. This is the Grand Central area right here, St. Mark's Basilica right there. Here is the Grand Canal, and so everybody gets around on boats. There are little side streets. They say you can't get lost in Venice. I was there and I got lost. Yeah, so all you gotta do is find the Grand Canal. I was looking for pizza, by the way. We ate pizza everywhere we went in Italy. Here you can see a beautiful opening. There's the Sacre Coeur over there looking out on the Adriatic Sea. All right, here are some gondoliers on their gondolas, and they would take you through there. They're like taxis. You catch these guys. Lately, they've become very touristy, and so they're kind of expensive and this kind of thing. The water looks really clear right there. And this is called the Bridge of Sighs. So right back over here is the museum called the Uffizi offices. And on this side, this part right here would have been the courtroom, and on this side would have been the jail. And it's called the Bridge of Sighs because the guys were walking from the jail or the courtroom and back and forth. These are the ones who had been condemned to die for crimes, and so they were sighing because they knew that they were going to go die. So that's why people think, oh, how romantic. You're going to sigh when you go. No, it's all about dying. So, but people do like to row under there. I will tell you, this is like a side canal right here, so it doesn't really go anywhere. So, when you ask to go under the Bridge of Sighs, it's very, very touristy. Every year, is this showing it? This is hard to tell. The land is in this dark color here. Venice is right here. So this is the Adriatic Sea. They were very big into trade by the sea. So Florence was big into trade, but they didn't have a port. So Venice had an advantage here with having a port right here. And every year the Duke, no, he's not called the Duke. Anyway, the leader of Venice would come out, and I think they still do it to this day, where they have a marriage day, and it's the marriage of Venice to the sea. So there's a marriage ceremony happening, and they throw a marriage ring, into the sea from the city. And so it's this big wedding thing. If you're going to be looking at who's the most famous artist in Venice, it's this guy. His name is Titian. And Titian worked for the leadership of the town, and he painted lots of works. Maybe, I don't know if you'll recognize his most recognizable one. One of the things that he did for his techniques, he always started ever painting by painting the background red. So it started out red, and then he added to it. So there's almost like this red kind of hue on everything he paints. This is his most famous painting. Anybody seen it before? Mm-hmm. It's called The Rape of Eurydice, and it's about this Eurydice being taken off by this guy. I don't know the story very well, but notice he used a lot of blue as well here. Blue was a very common color because it showed how wealthy they were. Because remember I told you about blue? You had to grind up the lapis lazuli, right, and use it. All right, back to Rome. Now Rome's going to rise. Now that Florence has kind of fallen from favor, and that whole Savonarola thing going on over there, Rome is going to rise. So the French are gone. The Rome's going to take the lead in the Renaissance, and Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI, is going to run a lot of this going on. This is the Pope's girlfriend. That's weird, right? This is the Pope's son. One of his sons. He had 10 or so children. He's the Pope. He's not supposed to have any. His name is Cesare Borgia. This is his daughter. You may have heard of her. Her name is Lucrezia Borgia. And his other son, they called him Juan. Okay, there's Juan. Their family was very, very close. They made lots of decisions together. So even though he was the Pope, the girlfriend, he really supposedly loved the girlfriend, although he sent her off because he had other girlfriends. So So this is kind of maybe, I don't know if it's the height of the corruption of the church, but this, remember I told you Savonarola said he didn't believe that the Pope was representing God on the planet. Do you see why? And also, do you remember that the Papal States were a political realm as well as the head of the church? So he was a really good politician. He was not a good priest. All right, but he wanted it for political power. So one of the first things he wanted to consolidate his power was to get rid of the Orsini family. All right, so there was an unusual number of poisonings going on in Rome during the Borgia years. If they invited you over to dinner, yeah, you may want to eat before you go. And then throw your food out or something, because poisonings were common. The Orsini family, who had been very big in Rome, a lot of them were either sent away or killed. A lot of intrigue going on here. As Cesare in particular got older, his father enlisted him a lot to do some of his dirty work, and he said, go out and take care of this guy and this guy. We'll get to Cesare. And also sort of a refounding of all of the ancient stuff. You know, digging out the ruins, making the ruins part of the city is something to go tour. So have tourists come in and see these things. All right, we have the brothers. There is Juan. Here is Cesare. So the story goes, we don't know exactly which one. They were a year apart. One was 1 year older than the other, but we're not sure who was who. We don't know which one was older. A lot of people say Juan was older and Cesare was jealous of him. And others say that Cesare was older and Juan, and he was still jealous of Juan because Juan had a pretty girlfriend that Cesare wanted. Thirdly, Cesare was jealous of his brother because, because of Lucrezia, their sister. Okay, they both liked her a lot. These are stories. We don't know if all these are true, but here's what we do know happened, is that Juan ended up stabbed to death in the streets of Rome. And many people believe that it was Cesare, who either did it himself, because he was the last person to see him alive, or had it ordered to be done. But Juan is gone, and Cesare is now the favorite son of his father. So here's Lucretia. Okay, so she was supposed to be beautiful and gorgeous. Now she is the daughter of the Pope. Oh, everybody openly knows this. So he's the head of Rome, and so he's going to be looking for she's officially illegitimate, right? Their parents aren't married. But he's looking for her a advantageous marriage that would help Rome with some sort of political deal. So he has her married off to this guy. And his name, let me get it right, is Giovanni Sforza. Ooh, we've heard that name, Sforza. Where's he from? Sforza's? From Milan. From Milan. Okay. Now, after some time went by, they got married, and some time went, she was pretty young when they got married, something like 18, you know, so young enough. And some time went by, and the Pope said, you know what, Milan is kind of falling from favor. I really need a more advantageous marriage for you, Lucrezia, so how about we annul the marriage? Okay, so annulling the marriage means that they were never really married for real, only legally. And so, do you know who grants annulments?
The Pope.
The Pope. Who's her dad?
The Pope.
The Pope, yeah. So he can arrange for this annulment to take place. But the guy said, wait a minute, I'm not good on this. And he said, and because of all a fear tactic, they really threatened to kill him, to say, if you do not say that you never were with her in a biblical way, then we're going to kill you. So he said, okay. So he admitted to that and said, yeah, we were never together that way. So now she's ready to be married to somebody else. There he goes, see ya. Here comes her second husband, and his name is Alfonso of Aragon. And Alfonso of Aragon comes along, and then it turns out that the Pope says, well, Aragon wasn't as advantageous as I thought. I really think that maybe we should get a different marriage. But instead of talking him into an annulment, conveniently, he died. And probably because of him. Cesare. Okay. So Cesare probably arranged for the death of this guy. And many people say that Lucrezia Borgia is tagged as being one of the most terrible people ever to have lived. Okay. I'm going to say she grew up in a licentious home where things were bad. But many of the things going on were really not attributed to her. Really, her father and her brother were behind the poisonings and things like that. Many people will say that she was the master poisoner. She's the one that mixed the chemicals together that got the poison going. We don't know if that's true. What we do know is there was a third husband. Here he is, Alfonso d'Este. She married him and actually moved away from Rome, which was probably the best thing, and she became the model Renaissance woman. All right, she had a court that was beautiful, and people came there with these great parties. She and her husband stayed married until she died. They had 10 kids together. So she kind of redeemed herself that way. But I do believe she actually died in childbirth on that 12th child or 10th child or whenever it was. Okay, back to her brother Cesare. So he went on to, one of the other reasons people think he got rid of his brother was that because of the order, that's another reason they think he was second son, was because the brother went into the military and he was supposed to go into the church. And he wanted to be in the military. So if he got rid of his brother, he would be the first in line and he would go become a military leader. And so that's what he did. He became this military leader and was actually quite good at leading armies. In fact, this guy wrote a book about him. And the book he wrote was called The Prince. No, y'all haven't read it? It's something you might have to read in high school at some point as Renaissance. It's actually very, very good. We're going to watch a little video on it in just a second here. He dedicated it to Lorenzo the Magnificent, but he wrote it about Cesare Borgia. So what does it say? The Prince is a political book. It is a guide to how to acquire and maintain political power. It is inspired the term Machiavellianism, or if somebody's being Machiavellian, it means they're being ruthless to get power. Immoral politicians like the ones described in the book. The main themes would be fear. It is far safer to be feared than to be loved. And the summary would be, the ends justifies the means. In other words, if I want to get something done, it doesn't matter how I get it done, as long as I get it done. Say I want to get something done and it's good, but I have to murder 10 people in order for that good thing to happen. Does that justify it? According to Machiavelli, it does, okay? But we don't know if Machiavelli was being sarcastic about that, but let's watch a little video about it and see what we think.
We're often appalled by how sly and dishonest many politicians are, but we shouldn't be. In moods like this, we need to remember and read the works of Niccolo Machiavelli, a late 15th century political advisor and political theorist who argued that we shouldn't think that politicians are immoral and simply bad for lying and dissembling and maneuvering. A good politician, in Machiavelli's remarkable view, isn't one who's friendly and honest and kind. It's someone, however occasionally dark and underhand they might be, who knows how to defend, enrich, and bring honor to the state, which is also an extremely important goal. Being nice may well be a virtue in general, but what citizens most need from their rulers is effectiveness, which may well call upon some darker arts. Once we understand this basic requirement, we stand to be less disappointed and clearer about what we want from our politicians. Niccolo Machiavelli was born in Florence in 1469. His father was a lawyer, and so Machiavelli received an extensive formal education and got his first job as a secretary for the city of Florence. But soon after his appointment, Florence exploded politically and expelled the Medici family, who'd ruled it for 60 years and suffered decades of political instability and turmoil. As a consequence, Machiavelli experienced a series of career reversals. Over just a few decades, he went from being an important diplomat to a semi-successful general to an enemy of the state, tortured and then exiled when the Medici returned to power. Although Machiavelli was rather a failed politician, he can be remembered as a truly great man because of two works he wrote, The Prince and the Discourses. In them, he attends to a central problem of politics then as now, that it's almost impossible to be both a good politician and a good person in the traditional Christian sense. Machiavelli proposed that the overwhelming responsibility of a good prince is to defend the state from external and internal threats to stable governance. This means he must know how to fight, but more importantly, he must know about reputation and the management of those around him. People should neither think he is soft and easy to disobey, nor should they find him so cruel that he disgusts his society. He should seem unapproachably strict, but reasonable. When Machiavelli turned to the question of whether it was better for a prince to be loved or feared, he wrote that while it would theoretically be wonderful for a leader to be both loved and obeyed, a prince should always err on the side of inspiring terror, for this is ultimately what keeps people in check. Machiavelli's Christian contemporaries had suggested that princes should be merciful, peaceful, generous, and tolerant. They thought that being a good politician was, in short, the same as being a good Christian. But Machiavelli argues differently. He asked his readers to dwell on the incompatibility between Christian ethics and good governance, and particularly refer to the case of Girolamo Savonarola. Savonarola was a Dominican friar, a fervent, idealistic Christian who'd briefly come to be the ruler of Florence in 1494. He'd come to power promising to build the city of God on earth in Florence. He'd preached against the excesses and tyranny of the Medici government, and even managed for a few months to lead Florence as a peaceful, democratic, and relatively honest state. However, Savonarola's success could not last, because, in Machiavelli's view, it was based on the weakness that always attends being good in the Christian sense. It was not long before his regime became a threat to the corrupt Pope Alexander, whose henchmen captured and tortured Savonarola, hung him in the centre of Florence, and burnt the body before the eyes of a now vengeful citizenry. This, in Machiavelli's eyes, is what tends to happen to the nice guys in politics. Rather than follow this unfortunate Christian example, Machiavelli suggested that a leader would do well to make judicious use of what he called virtu, virtue. Machiavelli's concept of virtu for politicians involves wisdom, strategy, strength, bravery, and when necessary, ruthlessness. In fact, at one point, Machiavelli uses the deliciously paradoxical phrase criminal virtue to describe the necessary ability of leaders to be cruel in the name of the state and yet still good as leaders. Machiavelli provided some criteria for what constitutes the right occasion for a bit of criminal virtue. Any violence must be strictly necessary for the security of the state. It must be done swiftly, often at night, counselled Machiavelli, and it shouldn't be repeated too often, lest a reputation for mindless brutality builds up. Machiavelli gave the example of his contemporary, Cesare Borgia, whom he admired as someone who knew how to be tough but not too tough, though we might question the criteria Machiavelli used. When Cesare conquered the city of Cesena, he ordered one of his mercenaries, Ramiro de Orco, to bring order to the region, which Ramiro did through swift and brutal ways. Men were beheaded in front of their wives and children, property was seized, traitors were castrated. Cesare then turned on de Orco himself and had him sliced in half and placed in the public square, just to remind the townspeople who the true boss was. But then, as Machiavelli approvingly noted, that was enough bloodshed. Cesare moved on to cut taxes, imported some cheap grain, built a theatre, and organised a series of beautiful festivals to keep people from dwelling on unfortunate memories. The Catholic Church banned Machiavelli's works for 200 years because of the force with which he had argued that being a good Christian was incompatible with being a good leader. But even for atheists and those of us who are not politicians, Machiavelli's insights are important. He writes that we cannot be good at or for all things, not only because of our limited abilities and resources, but also because of conflicts within moral codes. Some of the fields we choose, if not politics, then perhaps business or family life, may require what we evasively call difficult decisions, by which we really mean ethical trade-offs. We may have to sacrifice neo-Christian visions of kindness for the sake of practical effectiveness. We may have to lie in order to keep a relationship afloat. We may have to ignore the feelings of certain employees to keep a business going. And that, insists Machiavelli, is the price of dealing with the world as it is and not as we feel it should be. The world has continued to love and hate Machiavelli in equal measure for insisting on focusing our attention on the uncomfortable tension between two things we love and always want to have together but perhaps can't: effectiveness and niceness.
All right, so it's kind of this interesting philosophical political discussion. Are better leaders the ones that are Machiavellian? Maybe so, right? Because the nice ones are maybe too nice. I will say that what happened with, interestingly, with the Pope, with Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, he died after attending a dinner. He and his son attended a dinner with somebody, and both Cesare and Alexander got very, very ill, to the point that Cesare was laying in bed with a fever. He was turning purple. But he recovered, but his father did not. So he died probably from poisoning, which is ironic since they did so much poisoning themselves. Cesare went on. His father, no longer the pope, he fell out of favor with the next pope that came in, which we'll see here in just a second. There was actually one there, and then he met his end, and a new guy takes over. But Cesare went on to fight in battles in Spain and other places, and he was killed in battle. But yeah, this is the guy that became not the next pope, but the pope after that. His name is Julius II. So we see a picture of him as an old man, but he was much younger when he became pope. I'm not sure what that picture is right there. Not sure what those. Anyway, we have him coming in, but he's considered the warrior pope. There he is, because he actually went to battle. So those wars, when France came in to take over, he mustered an army, and they went and fought against them, and he was at the head of his army. So a lot of people admired that in Julius. This is a clip, by the way, from the movie called The Agony and the Ecstasy, and it's about Pope Julius getting someone to paint a very important painting on a ceiling, and that would be this guy, Michelangelo. All right. So as a young man, Michelangelo was apprenticed to Ghirlandaio in Florence under the tutelage of Lorenzo. And here's one of the paintings. So this is a painting of a man with a child. So Ghirlandaio painted the faces, but this back here was painted by Michelangelo. Does it look familiar? Does it look similar to somebody else?
Yeah, like Da Vinci.
A little bit like Da Vinci, right? So Da Vinci's ideas were kind of catching on right there, even with Michelangelo, who would have known Da Vinci. And right here you can see some of the background work. He probably would have painted the architectural works here and the stuff in the background. But soon it became obvious that he was okay as a painter, but he wanted to do something else. I have a little thing I want to show you here, because I have this pet peeve, and it's about the way you pronounce this artist's name.
Please, calm yourself. Green Ninja, Millhouse, Nice Vampire, Michelangelo, and Cleopatra.
Okay, his name is Michelangelo. All right, Michelangelo is the frog. No, is it a frog?
It's a
Turtle. It's a turtle. Okay, so that's why I play that, because I want you to know that I loved it when the Lego Movie did that, and I was like cheering in the audience, saying, yes, somebody finally sees that Michelangelo's a turtle, and the artist is named Michelangelo. All right, he wanted to be a sculptor more than anything else. Everybody said, oh, painting's where it's at, painting's the deal. He said, no, I want to be a sculptor. So he went to Rome, and he went to work for Pope Julius II, and he lived really long, a long, long life. So his body of work encompasses the entire idea. He was a, melancholy kind of a guy. He was a little bit of an Eeyore, oh, nobody wants to hang out with me, that kind of guy. He didn't have a lot of friends, but he was brilliant. He was a genius. And this is one of his early sculptures. I put this one in to remind you of the story that when he was very young, he made a sculpture of a little Cupid, something like this. And he sculpted it out of marble, and then he made it look older by putting something on it. I want to say tea or something like that made it look really old. And then he buried it, and then he got some people together and said, hey, we should go looking for buried, Roman statues, and then he brought them to that spot, and they said, we found a buried Roman statue. And they went and showed it to Lorenzo, and Lorenzo said, they looked at it very closely, found out it was a fake, and he said, this guy's really, really good, because it was hard to tell that it was a fake. This is called the Pietà. Now, there are several of these. I'll show you some other ones. This is the most famous, though. Pietà means the pity. This is Mary holding her dead son after the cross right here. And it's carved out of marble, and it is in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. It's in the centerpiece there in the church. Beautiful. Here we are on Mary's face, just lovely. So that is, carved out of hard stone, y'all. The fact that he was chiseling that and then, sanding that down, just beautiful. I will tell you, this is the only work that was signed by Michelangelo. And that's because while he was doing it, or when he had just finished it, some people came by to look at it, and they said, oh, this is a beautiful sculpture by that so-and-so guy over there. And it wasn't Michelangelo. He said, wait. And he went and chiseled his name right on the sash of Mary right there. Here's the face of Jesus from above. There's where it's written. Somewhere in there it says Michelangelo. Here it is from above. I wanted to show you this to show you how large Mary is. She's too big for Jesus right there. If she stood up, she'd be about 8 feet tall. And it had to do with the way he was composing the piece so that it looked more balanced. And furthermore, it was also elevating Mary. You know, because the Catholic Church tend to elevate Mary, right, as the mother of God. But you see her the hand coming out here, lovely, and then the hand coming across. It's going to look similar to something else he's going to do, right? Okay, now he did go back to Florence at one point, and at this point is when Florence and Rome were kind of mad at each other, if you will, and they wanted him to carve the David. Now, there was supposed to be a lot of statues in the city square, and David was going to be one of them, and they were all going to be Old Testament stories. Here's the face of David right here. You can kind of see, I think I'll bring his hand in. I want you to see how big it is. It's quite large. This is somebody working on it. And look at the look on his face, all right? So what's interesting is they wanted it, originally when it was being carved, it was going to be placed on the top of a building. And so that's why it was so big and why everything was sort of exaggerated. His hands are very large. His feet are very large. You would have been looking at it from underneath like this, and it would have fixed that perspective on that. And one thing that people have said, he's holding right here the sling that he will use to sling the rock to kill the Goliath, right? That's what's in his hand right there. But does he look very much like a young Jewish boy? It's more of a Greek-looking guy, right? So this is kind of bringing in, it's a story from the Old Testament, but it's bringing in that Neoplatonic ideal that Florence had become famous for. I'm going to show you his hand close up. It's large, it's too large for his body, but that would have shown strength. Notice also you can see the veins. I mean, it just fascinates me that that's carved out of hard rock. And there's his face. There's a great story about the fact that it's one piece of rock that was used for this, one piece of stone, that other sculptors had rejected. So they had been trying to do something with it, and they just couldn't get it to work. It was breaking wrong. The pieces were breaking off improperly. And Michelangelo said, let me give it a try. And he used to say that he would look at the stone, he would walk around and look at it, and he would visualize what was inside of it. And he would try to release. So he was going to try to release David from the stone. When he finished, it was such a spectacular piece of art that they couldn't stand the idea of putting it on a high building above. Furthermore, they had run out of money for all the other sculptures to be made, so it would have been just one statue standing in there. So what they did is they put him in the city square, up on a hill, and he has his gaze turning toward Rome. So that face is looking at Rome. So now look at the symbolism here. We have David, the little, the meek, looking off at giant Goliath Rome, and he's got a stone, and he's going to throw it, and he's going to conquer Rome. It was really a slap in the face of Rome, saying, we are going to conquer you. Not so much with God's help, but with ingenuity of man, that kind of thing. He went back to Rome because the Pope called him back and said, get back up here, Michelangelo, you're my guy. And he said, I want you to redesign St. Peter. St. Peter said, look, something like this. And he said, this isn't magnificent enough to be the home of the Pope. I want something magnificent. And so he got to work building St. Peter's Basilica the way we see it today. It looks like this with this lovely colonnade here and the big church with the giant dome, almost the size of the one in Florence. There's Julius. Here's Michelangelo explaining how it should be built. They had a very contentious relationship, Michelangelo and the Pope, and so the Pope asked him to do a couple of things. He said, I want you to work on my tomb, so when I die, you can put, I can be buried in splendor. And he said, furthermore, I have this ceiling I want you to paint. And he said, no, I'm a sculptor, not a painter. He goes, I'm the Pope. You're going to paint the ceiling. So the chapel is called the Sistine Chapel. It is found sort of in a maze of buildings right here. If you go to the Vatican City, which is smack in the middle of Rome, you have to go through pretty much a maze, a labyrinth, to get to the Sistine Chapel. But you want to make sure and go because you're going to see something amazing. There's the ceiling right there. A little better view. Way up there. All right, here we're going to see a whole bunch of different vignettes here, all biblical. Here's somebody getting the Word of God down. Notice how this painting looks a whole lot like a sculpture, doesn't it? So his painting now has changed where he's going to be very sculptural in his painting. Here's another Sibyl that's called a Sibyl, and she's opening the book here to read. And of course, the most famous being the center panel right there, where God is awakening Adam by touching his hand there, right? And he brings life to him. So this is supposed to be God. And that's a very famous part right there. All right, so he was put to work working on the tomb of Julius II. Kind of interesting. The most famous is this statue right here. It's a statue of Moses. And something odd about it, I always thought that was strange when I was a kid. I was like, why does he have horns on his head? Okay, so that is supposed to be Michelangelo's way of showing the wisdom of God coming into his brain. It's like beams of light coming into, they look like horns to me. I also, that's one of his, the dying slaves right here. That's Julius right there, and he's laying in a weird position, and Michelangelo kind of made him look weird on purpose, he said, because he didn't like him. And so he's made his statue very strange looking, and Julius hated it. And there were other statues that he also hated, Julius also hated, that they ended up not ever putting into Julius's tomb. There's Moses again, and here is the dying slave. That is in the Louvre in France, in Paris, right there. But it's time to build the dome. So here he had this big open space. He had to put a dome on it. Guess who he borrowed from? Filippo Brunelleschi, right? The guy in Florence. You can see the inside, look, the double dome, just like Filippo had done. It isn't exactly like it. I don't know if he used that type of brickwork right there, but he did manage to do that with the little topper on there. If you look from below, it looks like that. Look at that lovely art. All the apostles, I think, there. If you're this is an artist rendition. If you're walking down the hall, you can see how grand and magnificent it is. And when you get to the middle, there's this thing it's the altar called the Baldacchino. And this is carved out of wood by a guy named Cellini. Just beautiful right there. And that's where the Pope will give some of his sermons. A lot of times his sermons are given outside to all the people out in the big, giant open area there, so he can reach everyone. And now on the same, so you can see the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel here. Michelangelo, when he painted it, had to be on a scaffolding laying on his back the whole time. All right, he hated it. But he got it done in a really short amount of time, like a year and a half or something. It was quite amazing how quickly he got it finished. But he was hurting. His body was hurting because his neck was always craning, and he was laying down his paint all over him. The paint had lead in it, all this kind of thing. It's amazing he lived so long. Apparently, some stories say that while he was up there painting that, he had a visitor come in, and that visitor was a very young Martin Luther. And that Martin Luther may have had an effect on Michelangelo, that he might have been a closet reformer. We don't know if that is true. But after that was all finished, Julius made him paint another painting on the wall called The Last Judgment. Here it is, and we're going to see, there's Jesus in the middle with Mary. And I think we're going to watch a little video. I'll show you some pictures, and I'll put the video up for you to see, explaining all this stuff here. It's kind of creepy. Yikes. All right, I'll let this guy explain it to you.
All images of the judgment up to that time had God on a throne in the center, with angels and saints ranged along horizontal lines. Michelangelo again started an artistic revolution, developing his story along perpendicular axes. His work invades the enormous white wall that seems to explode in a whirlwind of figures that all rotate around a central figure, apparently without rules. All it takes is to observe with a little more attention to see that the scene begins on the left, where the blessed rise towards heaven. God is in the center, but this time looks like Christ the Judge, and his position is the same as the Apollo of the Belvedere, the famous statue found in the Vatican and imitated throughout the entire Renaissance. His hand, in a circular movement, moves the whole scene, letting the damned fall towards hell and helps the blessed into heaven. The Last Judgment of the Sistine Chapel has nothing to do with the anatomy lessons of the ceiling. Here, the naked bodies, particularly those of the damned, no longer have noble and composed positions. Instead, they're gawky and muddy as they scream and scramble. They're almost caricatures of all that is negative in the human condition. If you concentrate on the scene, you can almost hear the screams of pain, the noise of the souls rushing to their own destinies, and the deafening trumpets that announce the end times. Only in the center does the scene seem suspended in an unreal silence. Even the saints and martyrs, all turned towards Christ, are anxious and terrified as they wait for the final verdict to be pronounced. Even the Madonna is timid and resigned at his side. Some of the blessed kiss each other and hug one another with enormous relief. Up above, outside the circular movement, angels almost threateningly carry the cross and symbols of the Passion. Christ the Judge is wrapped in a blinding light. Nonetheless, both the damned and the blessed can't help looking towards him. In the Last Judgment, too, the images don't all have the same perspective. The figures of the blessed and the damned are randomly grouped or distance themselves, leaving blue spaces. Every corner is frescoed with infinite care given to the tiniest details. Some of the saints are easily recognizable because they hold the symbols of their story or their martyrdom in their hands. St. Peter, on Jesus' right, holds the two keys. St. Lawrence holds the grate, and St. Sebastian kneels, holding the arrows with which he was martyred. One of the most famous images is St. Bartholomew, who died skinned alive. The saint, seated on a cloud, is painted as Pietro Aretino, the Tuscan poet who had dared to criticize nudity. But the most celebrated detail of all is the skin that the saint holds in his hand, in which Michelangelo put his self-portrait. In fact, at the height of his creative work, the artist truly felt skinned alive by those insistent criticisms. On the lower right, the angels of the apocalypse sound their trumpets with every breath in their body, blowing out their cheeks to the bursting point to wake the dead. Angels and demons pitilessly let the desperate damned fall into hell. As your gaze drops slowly downwards, the scenes become more and more terrible until you arrive at Charon, who beats the souls away from his boat with an oar and sends them off towards Minos, the judge of hell, wrapped in a serpent. The figure of Minos, besides being recognized as the Pope's master of ceremonies, was also identified with Pierluigi Farnese, son of Pope Paul III, who, in Rome, was known for acts of violence and sodomy. On the left, according to the theory of the resurrection of the flesh, the reborn rise into heaven, getting their bodies back, some of them holding a rosary, a criticism of Luther's theories.
So he said criticizing Luther. All right, he had several Pietà. The most famous one is the one I showed you with Mary seated. And here you can see somebody, this one's unfinished, right here. Here's another one. There are 5 different Pietà. I've seen 4 of them. One of them's in Milan. Look at that one. That's not one of the Pietà. That's a different one showing the struggling. It's called the, it's something like the struggling slave or something, trying to get out of the rock. Here is another tomb that all the sculptures on there were made. In fact, I think that may have been Julius's tomb at the end. He rejected the other one. Raphael was another artist at the time who was contemporary of Michelangelo. They hated each other. Raphael always thought that Michelangelo was a brute, and Raphael was sort of a little bit of a fancy kind of a guy, you know, and he always wore the latest fashions, where Michelangelo walked around in, you know, overalls, whatever he was wearing, right? One of his famous paintings here is on the wall of the, in the St. Peter's Basilica. It's called The School of Athens, and we're going to be seeing all these, so it's very much about, not sacred, but classical. So you can see right here in the middle, we have Aristotle and his teacher, not his teacher, who's this guy? Socrates, right there. Oh, Socrates is pointing up, and Aristotle's pointing out. You can see it on the wall right here. And who's here? Here we go. Oh, it's Plato. Sorry, Plato, Aristotle, Diogenes. This guy is Heraclitus, but that person is painted. That is Michelangelo. That's a portrait of Michelangelo painted by Raphael, showing him as Heraclitus. Kind of this brooding, sad guy, right? And we have Euclid and Zoroaster and Ptolemy. Raphael, I don't know if you can see, do I have that picture closer? Do you see the artist right there? Where's he looking? Can you tell? He's looking right out at you. So remember with Botticelli looking out at you? So here's here's an example of that, the artist looking out at you. We can see our perspective in here with our architecture that brings it all down here. Interesting that it's in the church, it's talking about Athens. But I will tell you that Raphael is most famous for his Madonnas, the paintings of Mary. You might notice something you recognize down here at the very bottom of the painting. I'll bring it in closer. Those are called Raphael's angels, and they become very, very popular. People just put this part of the painting on their wall. This is another one, another Madonna with the baby Jesus and John the Baptist right there. So some beautiful, beautiful works. Here's one in Tondo. This one, by the way, can be seen in Washington, D.C. At the Smithsonian. And another one of the Madonnas right here. And this is the Ascension of Christ. So definitely he was hired by the Catholic Church to do these paintings. Here's Jesus welcoming the fishermen. They're putting the nets on the other side, right, and making a big catch. But this is one of his famous ones as well, St. George and the Dragon. And St. George becomes the patron saint of England. All right, so after Julius died, this guy became the Pope. This is Giovanni, I can remember his name. Giovanni de' Medici, but he's going to become Pope. He is the second son of Lorenzo. He began his career early. He was chased out of Florence by Savonarola. He traveled, he came to serve Julius II, became a good soldier. He was captured by the French and he escaped, but when Julius died, Giovanni maneuvered his way to become Leo X. And this name is going to be important next year, okay, because he's going to be in charge of some important stuff. On the left is Julio de' Medici. His cousin, his adopted brother, he will also become a pope. All right, I'm done with y'all. Have a Merry